Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see such a beautiful full house this morning. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Whitey Basson. This is why you are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitey Basson. My name is Bruce Whitfield, and for the next hour or so, I've got the great pleasure of talking to Whitey about a career in retail. If anybody has got a specific question for Whitey, and this is not a great interactive environment, I'll keep an eye on my social media, although I look around and I'm not too sure how many of you are necessarily going to be on Twitter. It's not a judgment, it's just an observation. At Bruce Business, if you have a question, by all means, just pop it at Bruce Business on Twitter. Okay, well, anyway, you're welcome to do that if you have a question that I'm not putting to Whitey. In the 1960s, there was a lovely little clothing business called Pepcore. It had originated in Uppington, and it was incredibly well managed, and it had clothing retail down to a T. It decided then to break into food retail, and there was this little chain of 8 stores called Shoprite, and Pepcore paid R1 million for 8 stores. By the time Whitey Basson retired, the business was worth 30 billion rand and was a pan-African retailer, the 88th biggest in the world.
130.
130. Did I miss a mark? I'm just checking. I'm checking if you're paying attention.
I am.
Good.
You lost $1 billion.
Hey. What's that between friends? A remarkable career in retail. I can't help wondering, reading the book, which is lovely, by the way, and if you don't have it, you should have it. There are lots in the bookshop just up the road over here. I can't help wondering if you weren't a bit disappointed that it wasn't bigger.
No, it was supposed to have a different title.
What, the book?
Yeah.
Not the book was bigger. That Shoprite was bigger. No, the book's big.
No, we sell it per page.
What was the title supposed to be? Meneer Basson.
Bullshit baffles brains.
Bullshit baffles. It would have sold more, I think. But I can't help but thinking, after all of that time in growing Shoprite into this giant on the African continent, there's not a little bit of you that wishes it could have just been that little bit bigger, because you worked bloody hard at doing it.
Yeah, I would have loved the business to be bigger, but we had 2 big failures, one in Egypt and one, obviously the biggest one in India. So that really put a brake on us, and my time limit in years was just not enough to convince the Indian government to change their laws so that it makes sense for somebody. But that did put a brake on it, and then obviously Africa was difficult, with lots of unexpected problems, if I can call it that way. It's not an easy route, but for the rest it was fine. It was quick, and fortunately we had the opportunity that we could move very fast with 2 big takeovers, substantially bigger than what we were, and that saved us time and distance. So we made up some of it, but yeah, India would have been, I would have gone back there if I still had enough time.
Yeah.
So maybe if there's anybody that'd like to speak to the government and lend us a couple of bucks, we'll go back there.
But I wonder if in a different environment, and there were various approaches to you during your career to say, go offshore, go and run a big multinational, whether you wouldn't have got greater satisfaction from that, or was Shoprite enough for you?
No, the level of sophistication, especially in the US, really triggered me. I think if I stayed there long enough at times, then I probably would have said a shot in the US is worth 10.
Yeah.
So that did go through my head, and it's a fantastic environment because you don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty, which is all solved. You don't have to go and pull your generators, cord yourself.
You hardly had any problems with load shedding. I mean, poor Peter Engelbrecht nowadays is like living...
Peter is living in a wonderful time. In Africa, we had only load shedding. There wasn't load, so it was,
Exactly.
it was all shedding. So,
Exactly.
no, it's... but in the States, obviously, things work much better and easier, and the sophistication was very good.
But more competition, of course. One of the great
Yeah,
advantages...
we didn't have that much competition.
Correct. So, in
We
a
had
way...
a small company, Pick and Pay, but that wasn't really competition.
A small issue. We'll get to Raymond Ackerman and regrets and things like that in a moment. But when you are growing in a deeply dysfunctional political, social, and economic environment, it does keep competition out, but at the same time, you have all of those headaches that you might not have had in a place like Europe or the United States to contend with. But it's almost plays to your advantage, doesn't it?
I think there's a misunderstanding about Africa and the amount of growth that there is in Africa and the opportunities that is in Africa. So I actually last night I had to get you up to date as well.
Thank you for doing the work. I appreciate it.
He doesn't leave you alone, so you've noticed that. He offered me coffee to make me awake so that I can take the shots easier. But Africa, if you look at the world and you think what great opportunities are there, so how do you match that with the problems that we had? I mean, there's these figures were 15 figures, some 7 billion people. 1 billion live in the Americas, 1 billion in Europe, 1 billion in Africa, and 4 billion in Asia.
Yep.
The projected figures is that Africa will, by mid-century, go double up and to 2 billion. And by 2100, the population of Europe, Africa, and America and Asia static. But Africa double up again to 4 billion. And also, that would mean that between Africa and Asia, it would be 80% of the world's population. Now, to put that into perspective, a retail company, I don't know if it's the same with electricity.
What's that?
Well, as long as you just use your own coffee mug, you should be okay. But it will literally be 80% of the world population now. If you have that sort of population growth, and that's why Russia at the moment is finding shields in the boats when they put them in Simonstown. There was no fish in Simonstown, so they couldn't have been out fishing. But I think that there's a big race because people don't really appreciate that Africa is the fastest growing continent. Yep. And if you can overcome the problems that you just spoke about, and there are lots of them, but if you're on site, you can solve them. And we were talking about this morning about the Oppenheimers, etc. But look what they did when diamond was discovered and gold was discovered. Things weren't substantially different to what it is now. Okay, they didn't have...
Well, they had electricity in Kimberley because it was the first place in Africa to have electricity. So that's the difference. They had electricity in Kimberley.
They had diamonds that lifted it up as
exactly.
Well. So no, I don't think that the African part of it was as difficult as people would think of it. And then you don't have these areas where you just can't move forward because you just have to go around it, and there's another world out on the other side of the bridge.
So how then do you plan for a 20 and 30-year horizon in such an unpredictable environment?
Well, the first thing, if you read the book...
As I did.
Okay.
But not everybody else here has.
Okay, well then we must stop the meeting and let them buy some books. And
come back next week, same place, same time, once you've read the book and you've done your homework.
The situation is very few people sit down in the beginning stages and say, what do I want to achieve with my life, with my finances, whatever it is? And that means really sits down in your own room and write and tear up pages. And Van Rooyen used to do that. he had more people torn up pages in his office than actually written on pages.
This is Renier van Rooyen, the founder of PEP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you really go through that. Now, what did I have to do coming from PEP, walking into a 8-store building where the chairs were lamsakkig, what I don't know what the word is, they kept on tilting, and sitting on top floor. I said, where do we want to go to? And I said, we must be the second biggest retailer, not the first, because then you got nobody in front of you. It's interesting, they said, Fangio, the guy who said, race driver, said, if you're behind Fangio, you're bound to be second. So I just put, if I'm behind Raymond Ackerman, I'm bound to be second. Okay. So it was easy for me. And then you really have to work through the processes that you have to do. And at one morning, I woke up and I thought, oh, hell, I can't get enough stores to open. I need to do a big takeover if I want to get to my goals that I set out to myself. So I desperately worked on achieving takeovers of weaker companies, Grand Bazaars, OK Bazaars, Checkers, to get to that position. I didn't expect Pick n Pay to drop back to number 2. That was not in my plan. So.
No, it wasn't in your plan, and they had various distractions which we can talk about. But this idea that you can set a goal and say, right, I want to be number 2, but the process of doing it is about taking advantage of opportunities as and when they arise in this environment, which is very difficult, because not everybody has got the same growth appetite and growth mentality. And if you're not growing in retail, you're going backwards.
Sure.
And so you were observing absolutely all of your competitors all of the time and looking for those vulnerabilities.
That was probably our saviour grace, that we did see that we did have weak opposition, really weak opposition, that we could take over and change. And as I always try and explain it to my wife and a few other people, that at some stage, a business in South Africa, a country like South Africa, a business like OK Bazaars, whatever, it's better, and I try and tell that to government as well, sometimes it's better to break down everything and start afresh.
They've listened.
No. they have broken down, but they haven't started the second portion. But that's
just
really
be careful what advice you give. So sometimes government listens.
I saw you bringing my coffee in.
Exactly. Your leadership style. I remember being at the Investec dining room the one day, and you know when the tone of a room changes when somebody scary walks in. And it's a 2-tier dining room, and Stephen Kossip was standing on the top tier, and I was on the bottom tier having a breakfast with some people, and he scopes the room like this, and he sees me. He goes, "What are you doing here?" It's like, "I'm just having a meeting." He says, "Watch this. I'm going to those people, I'm going to cock on them." Anyway, he goes over to the table, and he goes, one guy gets up, runs off, comes back 10 minutes later, reports back. He then does a detour back to my table and goes, "You see that? I cocked on them." Sorry, in Kerk. I forgot where I was for a moment. I cocked on them. And Stephen was very much in control, very much focused in the minutiae of Investec, very top-down. Was that your style as well?
No, really, I wasn't rude. I was very nice. I would never lost my
temper. You were not! Because I read the book.
I didn't write the book, so it's a lie.
You would, to use the term as I've done it already, and I'm feeling the heat, you used to cuck on people a lot.
Yeah, but in seriousness, I can't recall really that I were very rude to people and didn't pick them up in X number of hours or days afterwards.
That's the point is made in the book. Yeah. You would phone them later on to say, "Sorry,
yeah.
I was a bit rude." And I don't know if you said sorry, but you said, "I was a bit rude. I was a bit tough, and this is why." Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Like this morning, I had Alexitan to calm me down, but unfortunately, my little dog ate the other half that I got. So yes, but I don't think that I didn't try to do it. Sometimes I did it because you have to work very fast. I mean, you can imagine having a company the size of just Checkers. And you say to yourself, what went wrong? You have the Herbers, they make fortunes, then they sell on, and it comes up to Sanlam.
Because it went through ownership changes really quickly, didn't it? Was that through the 60s or thereabouts? Yeah.
Now, you say to yourself, what went wrong? I mean, if you take the economic model and you say capital, systems, everything, Sanlam was a giant, yet they made losses. The Herberts had just a piece of crockery paper, and they made profits. And literally the same happened between OK Bazaars and breweries. I mean, the Cohens, I think their children are still living all over the world. They don't have to worry about electricity for the money that they made in those days. And yet it was a gemors when we bought it. So you're really uptight. I mean, we lost like 100 million. We lost R1 million per day in one of our takeovers.
Which one was that?
No, I'm not going to tell you because I signed those documents that I'm not allowed to tell my wife, so that was good. and we lost that money, which was actually more than our profits that we had in the Shoprite group. Now, you get up in the morning and you say, oh, the birds are nice, you read a little thing. It doesn't work with a guy like that who knows as he gets his foot out of the bed, out goes a couple of 100,000 rands already. That's done, finish, out through the door. So then you lose your temper easier and you faster off with your guns.
Yeah, but it worked. The point, and there was a fierce loyalty within Shoprite. And definitely. What is the secret to building that ferocity of loyalty? And I don't think that's an understatement, of people truly believing in a vision, and even through the acquisitions, because you're bringing in people all the time, and cultures are different, and people are different, and you get a despondent crew from this mob, but you bring them in, and somehow you manage to drive a culture within the group that is homogenous almost.
Yeah, but I must now be careful that I don't,
don't. It's fine.
Go down to the same jail. I'm not sure what the jails look like in South Africa, but I didn't really attend to all the stuff that government, previous, old boards, etc., stuck to. Like people who used to get loans from me at no interest if they're short of money. Loans from the company. I had a big warehouse, and those guys are always short of money. So I gave them 10,000 rands. Said, I know it's illegal. It's your box. We're writing it off as food and whatever we do. You run your own box the way you run it for yourselves, but my people can't be without money at the end of the night when there's sickness in the house, etc., etc. So there was this like formal company, very well run, very good accountants, very good lawyers, and yet there was the people on ground floor was all like a brotherhood. And that helped a lot. I mean, but
you didn't go without trouble with unions. I mean, there was one very big strike. When was that? Early 2000s or thereabouts.
Yeah, the 1991 we had that big strike. It was actually a checker strike, and I knew about it. I knew it was happening because I was in Plettenberg Bay and I got to PE and the strikers were dancing Hop Joanna, so I thought, oh yeah, I better get my rhythm right. So I was I was Hop Joanna-ing there to get my strike under control, and I knew that a lot of the people supported us. So I said to the personnel guys, go and get the red ants, which are those guys from Joburg. I said, here's a letter that you write to all the people that are on strike to say you can strike. I actually like strikes, contrary to popular belief. Not strikes, but people that a strong union. I actually am supportive of that. I said, but those are the rules. You don't touch the customers. You don't break anything down. You don't hurt people that want to come and work. And those of you who's going to do it are going to get slightly hurt. You know, maybe you just lose half your ear or something like that. But no, I'm joking. But that's what happened. And the strike didn't last that long, 6, 7, 8 days. I first obviously had to tell my board that either you run the strike or I run the strike, because you know non-executive directors, they've got nothing to do. So if you have a thing like a strike which has lots of publicity, you have a lot of friends. So So it went reasonably mild, and I remember the guys left, and then in PE I had 2 or 3 stores which we were losing a lot of money. Now Checkers was very fortunate. They had stores that lost more money before the strike than during the strike because we didn't have to pay the wages.
It's like our carbon footprint has gone down because of load shedding. It's fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. So I said to the guys, they said, but the strike is over. I said, well, I'm still on strike. You'll have to talk to me now. I'm the striker. I'm not going to open the doors. And that stopped it. I then tore up the agreement, called all the blokes together, and the thing that we did with unions, and I had no big strikes after that. I spoke to the leaders of the union that I knew, and I said, listen, you guys have got a political system which is wrong. It's a system that you are not striking for workers' rights, you're striking for political prestige to form a government or whatever you want to do. But what I want you to do is you give me 15 people every year, you arrange what company, what union you meet in what part of the world. We'll send 1 or 2 of our guys along, and you go there every year. So our guys, our Labor Department guys, and 15 guys from the union went overseas every year, every single year. They had a lovely time. Last 3 days we sent them to Disney, so they came back, rugby team. They could have played rugby against.
And you sent them to nice places.
Nice, whatever they chose. They chose Cuba once.
And that's the best part.
And they said to me, Mr. Basson, don't send us back to these people. Their cars are not nice.
No, but again, illuminating, because you can see how high-functioning trade unions work in massively competitive economies, and the role that unions play. Explain a little further why you are in favor of strong unions. And what strong unions mean in your mind?
Because of our staff, 140,000 of them, there were probably 80%, 90% of people that had no chance in life other than to work their ways up through different salary structures, if you can call it. But it wasn't like the top 10% that could be the new generation CEOs or whatever that was. And I said, these guys just don't have an opportunity to talk. So get them together in an organized fashion, get responsible people that talks on their behalf, because they take the easy route out. They throw stones. I would have also thrown a stone because it doesn't cost much money. But they really wanted to be heard, and sometimes rightly so, because a lot of the things that we did was wrong. Wrong by decrees, first world decrees, and how can you lend money? How can you do this? What must you do there? You must come in on a Saturday morning, even if your wife is sick, you still come in. You don't come in, you get fired. I mean, literally like that. So I thought, no, there should be a formal system represented into the mainstream of the business, and they'd have a chance. And it worked for us.
Yeah, and it seems to have worked very, very well. I once chatted to Raymond Ackerman, and I said, what is your biggest regret? And he said, letting Whitey Basson buy OK Bazaars. Now, the backstory to that was, and around about the same time I saw Christo Visa, and I said, what was the pivotal point? And he said, Whitey came to my office one day and he said, should I buy OK Bazaars? And Christo said to you, well, what happens if Raymond buys it? Because that would have brought Raymond into your patch.
That would have been devastating to Shoprite. That is true, and it did happen. I was very tired that one afternoon. I said to Chris, I'm not going to go. I've done it once. What is in it for me? So he says, you must just think what will happen if Raymond buys it. And then I went home and I thought, oh, there is more work for me. I don't want that. But then, in fact, Raymond had lunch with me about a couple of months ago with his wife, Wendy, and his son.
Gavin. The pictures in the book.
Gavin. Yeah, that's
see, I looked at the pictures.
Thought you would look at the pictures and not read.
That's why books have pictures.
And I said, And one of the reasons I only paid R1, in fact, I should have paid less, because Wendy at a cocktail party said to Christo, we also looked at OK Bazaars, but we wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. So I knew, okay, that drops my price. I mean, the boss's wife that lives in his room says, no, we don't want to touch it. It's better than the senior director coming to tell that to me in my own office. So Gareth said to his mother, you cost us a lot of money.
Loose lips sink ships, I think was the saying. Your biggest advantage, and where you seized an advantage over Pick n Pay, was Pick n Pay started getting very distracted in the 2000s and did 2 jaunts into Australia. And that would have taken a huge amount of management focus and board time and stuff. And while they were doing that, you were doing something revolutionary, which today we take for granted, and that's starting to build massive distribution centers. And that seems to have been a critical tipping point in terms of where you went from number 2 to number 1 and then built up a gap.
Okay, I saw the systems in America with distribution that I just knew if you don't put that into South Africa, where supply lines are disrupted at times, etc., you're just wasting a lot of time. So then I hired very specialized distribution guys. So I wasn't the bloke who thought out how many chains go there, and half of them didn't work, but I did that. But that didn't withhold me from looking outside that. In fact, if I have to, in a small company with a few very good friends, I can tell you that I was sitting in Hong Kong in my bedroom. My wife was with me, and I knew the guys of Dairy Farm who owned the company that Raymond and them bought in Australia. So I said to the one guy, I can see you guys, because they couldn't sell that on because it was controlled by the government that you cannot sell it onto a major competitor. So I thought, okay, we're not competitors, we're new on the block, we will try and see. And I said to the guy, I think if I offer you a quarter of the price that you want now, you still do better, and I'll do a deal with you. So he says, yeah, it makes sense to us, because for us to sell it 1, it's going to take days and ages. So I picked up the line, I phoned Sean Summers, a good buddy of mine. So I phoned Sean, and I said, Sean, I've got a deal here. Now, I don't want to be the chairman, so we can make Raymond the chairman, and the 2 of us can run the business. You can run the big stores, which I don't like. I'll run the smaller stores, but here we can make real big money. He says, Whitey, you know what? I'm standing in Australia while you're talking to me, and I don't want this bloody place close to me. So I said, okay, well, then now there goes my whole scheme through the door. 3 weeks later, I read the newspaper, Raymond has bought Australia. Now, this is Sean. Now, ever since that day, Sean and I, when we meet, his wife is a very good friend of ours, Lorna, and I say, you think I can approach Sean to tell me who's lying in the story, because somebody must... And she says, please don't discuss it with Sean. Now, I'm sure that Raymond said, and I haven't asked him yet, but I will ask him. He wasn't looking if he's going to make 200 when I saw him last, but I'm still going to ask him, Jong, did you take that shot at me, or did you honestly sit down and made those sums which I told you earlier? Because I think he just said, bugger, Whitey Basson will never do a deal with him in partnership. And they bought it, and that saved my bum, because, I mean, you can imagine if we went into that Australian, it wasn't Raymond that did a bad job or Sean Summers. It was just that Australian market.
Yeah, and they did it twice. And while they're doing that, you're focusing on this market, while a lot of people are giving up on this market. And what was it that gave you the courage and the confidence and the fortitude to say, actually, we're all in, not only in South Africa, but on the African continent, which nobody else at that point wants to go anywhere near?
Well, the South African market was, as I told you, I made that sum when I had 20 stores that I can never catch up. Raymond's inflation growth was more than my total growth. So if I didn't buy stores, batches of them, as I told you, I would have been in problems. But I really knew I had to concentrate on that portion of it, but Africa itself was to me once we solved the South African problem, we got rid of all the people that, when I would call them weak players. I was going to call them stupid, but then I see you're not allowed to say that in public anymore.
But most of them are dead now anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, but their children are alive, and with all these,
dead men don't sue, and their kids get
cross. You see
Andre
de Ruyter is on TV now. We can't even come and sit next to you. So, yeah, I pursued that with all my heart, and I read up a lot on it. And strange to, I can say that, the American government helped me a lot in Africa. I never ever did a follow-up through the South African embassies or etc. I did all my work through my friends in Washington, and I think the reason why they helped me with which attorneys you should use and which should do this is that they obviously have read these books about 80% of the population. There's no way they're going to lift China out of this skids. So they have to be strong in Africa. Now, I don't know if Mr. Ramaphosa knows that, but he can play for 99 cents if he...
But the Africa opportunity, and since you've left, Peter Engelbrecht, your successor, has withdrawn from quite a few of those markets. Now, one doesn't criticize one's predecessor and one doesn't criticize one's successor, but I'm curious as to what you think of the strategy in terms of withdrawing from places like Uganda and the DRC and Madagascar and others. I mean, there have been, I think, 8 or 9 territories that have been withdrawn from so far.
See, I told you last night I was going to read to give you the truth. So, first of all, I took a vow to myself that I would not criticize anything that the new blokes or the blokes that were my colleagues do now, even if they're wrong. I talk to them.
So are they wrong?
At times.
Oh, sure.
At times. Like I was wrong many times. I just didn't have a bloke that told me that. But they are wrong at times, and I try and be as honest and sincere about it to say, just I do it with my wife. Ask her, you think I say to my wife, you're wrong? I say,
no, you don't. Jeez,
I don't. I say, you should consider.
Is that how you do it?
Consider the options.
Can I write this down? Because I may use that.
Works like a charm. If you say to your wife, I think this is something you should consider. Unless your wife is very stupid. But my wife normally comes back 2 days later and says, yeah, you weren't totally wrong, you were half wrong. But so. Anyway, just to tell you, if you now look, the bloke said they're leaving Shoprite Africa because we're losing too much money there. And we're going to just go away. Now, if you look, I think I left in 2017, the diluted earnings per share at that stage was 8 rand 60 cents.
Right.
8 rand 60. It went down as far as 6.69, and it's currently at 8.18. So 8.60 was still, in 17 it was still bigger than today by whatever cents. But if you take the inflation growth just at 6.5% for 5 years, that works out that you should have been 37% better off.
Yeah.
That's missing. So they shouldn't use Africa as an excuse. That is now where they lose money. It's not factually correct in terms of, and you can have that checked.
But particularly with the potential growth opportunity, and I mean, and it's a difficult growth opportunity, as Walmart has discovered with the acquisition at your behest, because I think you were worried that they were going to come in and either buy Pick and Pay and give you a club there. But you suggested...
I was worried about that.
Yeah, why did you buy Massmart instead? Did you know that it was going to distract them and keep them very busy?
I actually helped them.
Did you?
Yeah, the guy who came there for the what's name was in my office, and he said, we'd like to buy Shoprite. I said, I'm not sure if it's up for sale, but ask Christoph, because I knew he was going to tell them the same. And I said, I know it very well because Mark Lamberti and I are very good friends that ran Massmart. And I gave Lamberti, I actually helped him do the second biggest, because he didn't have space for all those big stores. Because I wanted him as a partner for Africa to do the non-foods in Africa when I could concentrate on the groceries and the los goedjies. And then I showed them, I said, this is what you should go for. Look at this, Massmart. Lamberti's prepared it. Typical, he's a Walmart man, look at it. And they took it, hook, line, and sinker, and they bought it. So I was very happy that they bought Massmart. And then they messed it up with getting game on shelves. And really, and I don't want to say, Walmart is a fantastic company. I learned a lot from them. I spent a lot of time. I used to spend 14 days a year in America with David. I don't know if you can recall David Watkins. He was the number 2 guy at Pick and Pay at some stage and went to live in America. And he helped me to take me to all the different companies in America that was on the up. And I took 3 or 4, 5, 10 sometimes of the guys with me. And the same as I did with the unions, and we went there and worked in the actual shops. They allowed us to actually go and work in the bakeries and whatever you have. So I was pretty clued up as to what they were doing. And Walmart was one of the companies who were streets ahead of everybody else. But there were other companies doing. Kroger's is now the number 1, I think. I spent a lot of time with them as well. So how can I now describe it to you? You have to manage it, and when Walmart bought, I thought they would come with real serious oaks that were traders. But by then, old man Sam Walton had already passed on. I actually missed him by 3 weeks. I was going to see him in Bentonville, and I sat in a lift shaft for the whole night. Because there was what are these things that turn the red circles on the TVs? When the weather comes in and they sucks you out of the window.
Tornadoes, yes, hurricanes.
I was in a
context is important, right? We've got this.
I was in a tornado coming down the streets, and we could see it coming through with a guy, Darryl Fine, who I think he weighed about 400 kilos, and he used up all the oxygen in the lift shaft. So that was my meeting with Sam Walton. I was in the lift shaft. Didn't see him at all. And then the next morning when it was gone, we stole bolognas and stuff from their fridges because they didn't offer us food that night. I was actually in their fridges cutting up bologna and bread. Anyway, I thought they would get those guys in, but they brought computer guys in. You know, they worked sums out in the after hours. And I said, no, we're here. And when I saw them trading, I thought, no, that would be wrong. And the second thing I did was I spoke to government and I said, you must keep them listed because that puts a barrier on their heads. Because nobody likes to go out there and your children at school says, oh, your share price dropped by 25% or 30% or whatever it was. So I knew they couldn't do business decisions because if they could do that, they could do it out of their petty cash. They could destroy South African retail out of their petty cash. But I had them listed, and I see they're trying to shake on this listing, and I always say to the guys who are in the play now, just keep them. Let them report back to, like the church, you report back to the congregation after a while.
What makes great retail?
Hard work is number 1. Hours and hours of hard work. And then if you can get a combination of professional people who enjoy the humdrum of being a retailer, that is what you require to make a team work. So I had a hard time finding enough retailers, old school retailers, that could go to the next generation or to the 50, I think we're the 55th biggest company in the world. I couldn't find enough people to get there. So I took young chartered accountants, lawyers, etc., and said, you're going to get a good job, you're going to get a good salary, you're going to get shares, which is always a difficult one with Christo there, because if there are 3 shares on the table, he takes 2 and gives you with 1. Yeah, it's true.
It is.
But don't tell him it's only a few of us here.
No, of course.
You wouldn't share that with him, huh?
Never.
Okay. So we had to go that way to train people to run the company after my time or through my time. And if you look at the management of Shoprite right now, they're fantastic guys. They really are. Peter Engelbrecht is a hard worker. He comes from a poor background. He's got a CA. He's very strong, competitive. Joe Brons runs the liquor stores. And most of those guys that are there are really fantastic. My worry about Shoprite right now is that I've got this fantastic middle management, executive management, and I've got a board now who's very much like the Walmart board.
What does that mean?
That means that they don't know what I mean.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Boards in South Africa, non-executive boards, really are not related to their business. And you saw that in Steinhoff, you saw it
We'll get there.
Okay, well then I'll leave it. I won't do a bad note on whoever his name I was going to say. You asked me, but that's the problem. And that can be the downfall of Shoprite over a period of time.
It happens slowly, doesn't it? It goes slowly, and then suddenly. Yeah.
Slowly. But you can see the tea rooms will be bigger, and the number of conferences will be bigger, and the meetings take longer, and nobody answers the telephone, and you all leave at 4:45 and not 5. So that happens because that's the culture that it brings. And there's nothing wrong, because it's just 2 sets of people that you have.
I look at The Secret of Retail, and it is what a man called Sam Cohen from OK had embroidered on a handkerchief, which I'm assuming he used to stick in his top pocket over here. And the letters are YCDBSOYA,
Yeah.
which is?
No, you read it out to the audience.
You can't do business sitting on your ass.
That's right.
I mean, you already, I think, were operating in that way, but that must have affirmed your approach in terms of, because you're very active. Family holidays you would destroy regularly by going into, if you were in Paternoster and there was a Shoprite, you would go into the Shoprite and you would, for 3 hours, and the kids would sit in the car and wait. Because it is the drive that you had personally to walk the floor and to make sure that everything was right.
You can ask any... he said, I must look this way sometimes as well, because it's bad.
The cheap seats,
bad manners. It is bad manners if I don't. There's some lovely ladies, so I won't look at you after.
I don't blame you.
I think anybody that's been in retail understands the situation that when you are in retail, it involves a hell of a lot of humdrum work, long hours, and you actually get... Every day you lose a bit of your brain power, so you have to pump it up with reading, etc. So it is really a unique type of career. And I practice as an accountant as well. So I know that I've felt both sides of it. And I think it's just vital that it's there. I mean, if you speak to Raymond at his age now still goes to board meetings.
Yeah.
He goes to board meetings.
They must love that.
No, Carol says it's fantastic, but he's on the right pages in any event. So it's there. But so what makes Ackerman different to the other guys in the trade? He's just a bloke that enjoys simple things, looks at that and says, "Listen, change that."
People used to think he was this really sweet little man who would go and push the trolley out to the car for the ladies, and he was gathering intelligence. He was by the time they got there, they didn't have any clothes on their backs anymore.
He was the smartest retailer. Rainier was the smartest retailer I bought.
Okay.
And I think Raymond was number 2 of retailers that I knew on a daily basis that I pushed arms with, etc. And I say this with that, when the kids became, I think in the book I talk about first, no, I did some other place, first generation, second and third generation. So Raymond was a wealthy guy, so that story that he started with 20 cents in his pocket is not factually correct. He didn't tell you what he had in his boot of his car.
Was he a member of the ANC?
No,
I was just checking.
But the Ackermans, there's a crowd called Ackerman Stores as well. So
yes.
Remember that.
A.C. Kermans, yes.
A.C. Kermans. So he's one of the guys who came from a wealthy family and really started doing basic things right to build up that company, which is built up literally on his own.
As people give you the credit for Shoprite. How important was Christo in the process?
No, Christo is not a retailer, so let's start off with that. He's got a very good retail brain, doesn't like being on the floor, doesn't like too many people around him, but as a corporate thinker, is probably the cleverest guy I've worked with in that area of the world. So when we look into a deal, then he looks at all the graphs, etc., etc. If we move that to that, then the price goes up. And there's, not the price of rice, the price of the shares. So he was always driven as a corporate guy. The fact that they call him a big retailer is just a misnomer. He invested in retail stocks.
Yeah.
But in that, he is very, very good. But doesn't like detail, doesn't like working on that type of thing at all.
So he once said to me, he told a story of your son, and you said to your son, he said, what do you want to be one day? And he said, I want to be like Oom Christo. And he said, why do you want to be like Oom Christo?
It's true.
He says, because you do all the work and he makes all the money.
That's right. That was my second son, yeah. He wants to be like him. Christo does no work and he makes all the money. You work your arse off and you don't make money.
But you did okay. I mean, there was a fair amount of... I was reading some stuff yesterday as well. That one of the chief critics of your salary was the then chief executive of the Public Investment Corporation.
Brian Molefe.
A young man called Brian Molefe, yeah. He of the Eskom Pension Fund. Yeah.
I got Ann Crotty to write that I was underpaid. You saw that in the book.
Absolutely.
But Brian Molefe, and that's true, I sent him a message to say that I don't lecture full-time anymore, but I am open between 5 and 6 in the afternoons if he wants to know the difference between a salary and a bonus. I can teach that to him.
Did you get a response?
No. Didn't tell it to him. And those guys, you tell it to the bloke right at the back because he's sitting at the back because he's Brian's pal.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. What was it about Marcus Jooster that you knew was rotten?
I really didn't know anything about Marcus Jooster's dealings or wheelings or whatever. I disliked the fact that he was extravagant on himself. I could never work out if it was his company's money or his own money. And he had a way of... Christo can laugh at himself. He's an ordinary bloke. Sometimes he's quite common. You know what I mean?
Is he?
Yeah.
Good to know.
He comes from Uppington.
Okay, no, good point.
He learned to speak English on the way in. But Jooster is a bloke that I think he has an air about him. If he has a yacht on the Med, then his yacht is bigger than anybody else's yacht. And I could just never see that it worked, that he was a guy capable of running the empire that he was controlling. So I said to Christo, it's impossible. It can only be the Lord that can run a diversified business like that and make a success out of it. So that was my criticism of him. I never saw him doing anything wrong. I never saw him, and I'm still not convinced that they say he could have cooked the books and all sorts of things like that. I'm still not convinced on that one because in a big company it's still very difficult. And if it's true, then they must give us a PwC report to read. So I cannot tell you that that is something wrong, but I can say that things like going to the rugby and spending 80 million rands or whatever the numbers are, you would know better, on a rugby trip, and my mates go and they had nothing to do with Steinhoff, and they go on a trip, and I asked Christo who paid for it, and he says Marcus paid for the next week. I asked him who paid, and he says no, the blokes paid themselves. And the only bloke that I know that paid for himself was G.T. Ferreira.
Yeah, well, he insisted on paying for himself, didn't he? He insisted on paying for himself.
He said, you can take this check if you don't want to give it to charity.
Yeah.
But that's the only one that I know. So it's
but an example of that, though, I mean, an executive who shall remain nameless was in his office the one day, and one of his colleagues came in late. He said, "Oh, why are you so late?" He said, "Oh, no, I've just come back from England." "Oh, what? No, went shooting." "Oh, that's nice." "Who took you?" "I know, went with Marcus." And said, "Now we got these Purdy shotguns, and we got these."
Yeah.
No, and it was like hell of a trip. And this executive then just, "Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you very much." And he went, phoned his broker, and said, "Please sell all my Steinhoff shares, because if that's how he treats shareholders' money, I don't want to be invested. Thank you very much." And it's a similar instinct.
I was not that close to him. In fact, they say he had a girlfriend, and she looked quite good looking when they showed, in these photographs, you can open it wide and close it,
No.
I must show you how to do it.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to look at her head, you can open just the head.
Okay. What's this in car?
But I never knew if he had that girl. She was very good looking. So I would have liked to have met him on his beach days as well. But no, I don't have any.
But operationally, you were looking at his operations, as you did when you were looking at acquisitions. You were looking at acquisitions, you saw bad operations. And you looked at his operations, you went, there's no way that the valuation that's attributed to this thing is because of what's going on in those stores all over the world.
I did work with Sanlam to say what is the valuation. I gave it to Christo. I looked at his footwear business, gave it to Christo, took photographs. And of that I knew quite a bit, because I worked with Renier on it, and he taught me that on the ground floor. And just nobody took notice that the meetings were, if you look at it's like I said to Christo one day, he was the chairman of KWV or something. I said to him, "You know what's the only thing bigger than KWV's profits?" And he says, "No." I said, "Your board." So, well, we must be careful about KWV.
No, don't use. We don't. Housewives of the Wynland.
I was going to say to you.
Everybody knows.
I was going to say to you after this, I hope you give me a fucking glass of that KWV.
When Christo comes to you and he says, "You know what we're going to do?
Yeah.
Marcus is going to buy Shoprite, and then you can report to Marcus." What was your immediate response? Maybe edit for the church. I don't know, but
I nearly dawned him. I was so cross. But he didn't say it like that. Christo's never, ever done to me that you report to that one. I said, I report to the board in general for any company. I don't report to anybody. Then I wouldn't work. So I must be honest that he never went and said, "You must do it." But the structures that were drawn meant that he would control Pepcor, Shoprite, through the what's-his-name, and Christo would control the holding on top. And he says, "But I'm here." I said, "And when you're dead, what must I do? Must I throw USD into the beach of that Clifton flat?" He's still alive. I can't say things like that. I just read it in the papers. But who's the owner of the papers here? Anyway, I was cross because Christo couldn't understand what I told him about the operations. And in fact, I offered to take, I said to him, when they built this place in the Strand, Poco or something, I went there one day and I said, "Christo, this is a design to make you bankrupt. You should go there." And I told him the whole thing. He never went there. 2 weeks later, he says he spoke to Marcus about it, and Marcus says, "I'm totally wrong. That thing is doing substantially better than the budget." So he went and shoot the bastard who drew up the budget and left. So I never saw anybody, and that's what I said to you about boards. In Shoprite, I appointed the current head of SARS, Kiswete,
Yep.
and his number 2 guy, Joseph Rock, who was a CA from PwC, brought him here to work for them, and then he went to SARS. And he could grab all the blokes because he worked out their schemes for them. He knew where the schemes were wrong. I pointed them because I said, they're both brilliant guys, and if I must get your cell phone number, then I'll send you Kiswete's latest meeting that he had of his year stuff. It is unbelievable. It's the best board meeting that I've attended in my life, or AGM, or whatever you want to call it. It's unbelievable. So I said, he's 30% of my expenses, so he can help me better than anybody else to tell me where we're losing money. And he smacked us before he became on our board for 30-odd million rands of a deemed interesting, which I didn't understand. And then I had all those people, Arnold Lowe, who was an engineer, could help me with the warehouses. So everybody on the Shoprite board had a job which they were really a specialist on.
Yeah.
Now you take most of the boards in South Africa, and you can take Steinhoff as well, and go through everybody and says,
There were lots of chartered accountants and professors.
but what? To do what?
Yeah, but and to your point, I mean, so you fall out with Christo over this. I mean, you have a disagreement. Are you friends again?
We're friends, yeah.
Friends, yeah,
Yeah, we're friends.
but it's not the same.
I watch him more carefully. No, we're friends, and we've been friends for a very long time. And I say this in public, that I've never seen him dishonest about the dealings that he had with his shareholders or his company. Dishonest. I mean, that he liked himself, that is so. But chartered accountants are flavor of the month to be a chartered accountant. But if you're now a chartered accountant, you get a set of papers. What do you know of the business? I was asked, a couple of people asked me to join their boards as non-executive. And one of the big companies I went to work for, I sat and listened, and I thought, ooh, yeah, I may as well listen to Annelies telling me what grocery line she wants to put up in the backyard, you know, that type of, what's that? And then I was called in by the holding company, which was a big institutional in Cape Town, which you people probably all have money with, one of the biggest. And the bloke said to me, we want you to take over as the chairman of the board. I said, why? He says, because the bloke who's currently the chairman is a farmer who is in conflict with us because he also farms with milk. So now you know the company. So I said, so you want me to take over from a guy who farms with milk, who I can't see what the conflict can be at all, to pass it on to me that knows absolutely bugger all about a cow or milk or yogurt or anything.
And it is, I mean, and one of the criticisms that comes through, and I think you've said it many times, is you've got institutional fund managers who start telling professionals how to do their jobs. Yeah.
And who do they feel comfortable with? They feel comfortable with chartered accountants and lawyers.
Talk to me quickly, because we're about to wrap up.
Thank you.
Your time... Your time, and I'm speaking to Michael Cardo this afternoon, the author of the Oppenheimer book.
Yeah.
The Oppenheimers built businesses in South Africa in difficult times. You built a huge business across Africa in incredibly difficult times through the transition from apartheid into new democracy, the assassination of Kasani, all of the stuff we know about. You've done that with dedication and rigor and opportunism and focus. Right now, I mean, in every queue I've been in this town, what passport have you got? Oh, no, I've got this one. Oh, no, I've got ancestral. I'm going here. No, I don't want to go, but I can go do this. And there is such a loss of gees and hope in South Africa right now. I mean, it's understandable, but have you felt like this before?
No, I must be honest with you. The last couple of months I've been rather drained. And I don't have the feeling that I want to phone somebody and say, let's talk about this. I spoke about somebody yesterday. I said, all I can do is say, let's go and have lunch and then think out something where we have mutual and common interests. But I feel very distressed about the situation. If you take my own personal situation, I mean, if America closes with AGOA, and I was part of that negotiations with AGOA at the time when Condoleezza Rice was out there, I would have to lay off at least 50% of my 300-odd laborers that work on the citrus farms.
Yeah.
That is factual. If AGOA goes out, I have no chance in hell to send that out because the local markets can't handle. I will just have to leave the trees, fire the people, and say, okay, I'll bring my production down. So I'm despondent about the situation. I'm not despondent, though, on the potential of Africa and South Africa in specific. But I don't know what the president must do to change it. I don't have that on my hands. And the politicians, obviously, they like artists, they want to be famous. So nobody's going to move 1 inch and become a deputy to another deputy who is a deputy to the deputy. So I'm not sure if that's going to be easy to do, but I think there should be, if they can get private business in, not too many, but enough private business and enough moderate people who understands the difference between socialism and capitalism, not say which one is right, but understands the difference, and then lay out your charges. Then you say, I'm here because of this. This is my policy. At the moment, we're snaking through it like that, and that makes me despondent, very despondent.
I wish I could have ended on a happier note than that. I wasn't anticipating that, but anyway, Whitey Basson, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.